times on that. So
Yeah.
So let's see. Hopefully, that is a little bit more effective. There we go. So tell you what, gang, why don't we stream on YouTube like normal instead of streaming on Twitch that I was showing off everybody to my very inadequate iRacing the other night. After, Steve, I will clarify, after 3 hours of looking for syndication, I will say, then the lure of the steering wheel took me. So let's see if the chat room is now active. There we go. Artemy X.
Yeah.
We've interrupted the Formula E podium. Oh, well. So no spoilers for Chris then. That's it. So pretty much, I think I'm ready to go. Matt, how are you doing for readiness of going?
I've got the chat out. I think I'm pretty ready. Got the notes up. The chat is out. Is Steve stockpiling comment of the week for us?
Yes, I think. If are you able, Steve? Basically,
I mean,
if there's a good comment that you're not necessarily going to read out, even you can just put it in as a candidate for comment of the week at the end. Josh Covey, I didn't know this was going to happen. Now I can't do anything for the next 2 hours. But yeah, it's Australia, Justin. You're right. Australia's coming, and the sound is a bit low. Oh no. I don't know how to fix that. Everything's the same as normal. Can anybody else confirm the sound's a bit low? Could it possibly be your volume at home that needs turning up? I hope it is that. And by the way, merchandise is coming, everyone. I have made a decision on what to do. I want to use Steve's amazing designs that he used there, and I think I'm just going to go ahead. I'm going to bite the bullet, and I'm just going to go and buy 100 mugs so that for all season, we just have mugs on sale on the website. And whenever they come in, it's a bit loud. It's fine for me. Shut up! Shut up, all of you! You're confusing me. And Steve always looks like that. It's a bit loud, you bugger. Honestly, it's like you have a live chat room and you think, the live chat room are our friends. No, the live chat room are there purely for their own entertainment. What was I talking about? Yeah, so we'll have the mugs, and I think I'll just have them sitting there all year. We'll have a little order thing on the website, and I will just try. Basically, I'll say a 2-week lead time because it gives me time to be bothered to get the brown wrapping paper out and sit and put it in a box and send it out to you. But I want people to be able to have them. I love the idea of people being in their office with a Missed Apex mug, and it's better than this. It has the race car. So it has this race car on it. That one.
I don't know. I still think beer coasters.
Yeah, we can do that too.
I think beer coasters because we can sell them cheaper and they're less breakable.
I want a T-shirt with my face on it and a big rainbow with sparkles on it.
That's all we want.
See, now my original plan for beer coasters, so I realized it was more expensive to print on two sides, would be to print Missed Apex on one side and then on the other side, like say a picture of a trumpet. Or a picture of a spanner, or a picture of a rainbow with some sparkles.
Yeah, I like it. No, I did like that idea, and we can incorporate something like that. Look, we'll see what reaction we get to mugs. Everyone wants a mug, and then we'll go from there. But now I've made the decision that we can put money up front first. That obviously does, does make things a lot
They're
easier.
easy to take advantage of.
That's right, they are. And Justin says, why not use something that drop ships them? We tried it before. What I want to reduce is the UPC, i.e. the cost to you. We're not going to make profit out of these mugs. We're going to cover risk, but we're not going to make profit. For example, Teespring, we put them up at like $15, I think, or 15 quid, including delivery, and there was no profit in that at all. And it's just a bit too much for a mug. I'd love to get them out there for 9 quid for a tenner. All right, let's do some podcasting. I think I'll just reset everyone. Reset everyone. Ring, 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 ring. And Chris would like everybody to know that he's the biggest martyr in the world, and he's just got in. Okay, so
fighting the storm, the beast from the east.
Absolutely. So let's have Steve and Chris go on mute for a minute, and let's get Matt up as the big fish and the big screen. So Chris is on mute, Steve is on mute. Steve's going to be on mute a lot because his plane's coming in. Plane's coming in over the background, but don't worry, Steve, if that means you're slightly delayed coming in. Remember as well, Steve, all the absences, all the silences get automatically edited out of the audio. So if you don't know what to say for a second, or you want to compose your thoughts, just be silent rather than going,
And take minutes if you need to.
Yeah,
that's fine, but it becomes very hard to edit those silences out of the video.
It does, but I'm just saying for the audio, especially for the quizzes. Initially, we used to get some people. We used to say like,
"Start already."
Why has Neil had to put in the chat? And Neil's had to put in the chat, "What a race!" Like, why are you doing this to me?
All right, guys, can Steve and Chris go on mute then, please, so that we can have the big face of Matt. Matt, continue making noises like you do.
Yeah, I think I'll describe in excruciating detail everything that happened in the Formula E race for Stevens.
What unbelievable! The likes of which we'll never see again.
Who would have thought that person would have crashed in just that way, that thing happened?
Okay, for some reason, Chris's screen isn't going to go away, but I'm not going to wait for that. And I'm just going to say, here we go. You are listening to Missed Apex Podcast. We live F1. Welcome to Missed Apex Podcast, brought to you by examninja.co.uk, who sell revision guides, workbooks, and practice tests to help children do the best they can at school. Go to www.examninja.co.uk to learn more. I'm your host, Richard Spanners Ready, and I'm joined by Matt Two Rumpets. How's it going there, Matt?
It's going well, very confusingly, because this seems all wrong for some reason.
Well, that's because it's Saturday night when we're recording this, and this is just due to a perfect storm of childcare illness, childcare issues. And this is just due to a perfect storm of childcare issues, illness, and work. Sunday was just going to be very difficult. Then we realised that we're parents and we never do anything good or fun. So actually, Saturday night is free a lot of the time.
Yeah, sadly enough, that's very, very true about 99% of the time. You're either at work or you're at home as a parent.
And we have a guest star on the panel today. Minding the chat room is our video editor and director, Steve Amy from Australia. G'day, Steve.
Hi, everybody, and welcome from greetings from the future.
He's old and Australian, which is the purest form of bluntness. Also, diving in from the last minute due to a snow-cancelled gig is Chris Rainbow Sparkle Stevens. Hey, Chris.
Hey, Spanners.
Looking cold?
Yeah, a little bit. You know, the beast from the east is strong. She cancelled our race meeting today.
Well, I hate to say it, but little Treeface, my little 7-year-old, was out karting in the snow. Shame the big boys can't do it. We are an independent podcast hosted by MissedApexPodcast.com. We aim to bring you a race review before your Monday morning commute. We might be wrong, but we're first. This show is safe for work. We're keeping it clean here, so you can play this with kids in the background or at work. Well, Matt, this week might be a huge letdown for all the folk that caught us for the first time after the fantastic weekend with Joe Sayward, then a fun panel show, then the amazing Mark Gallagher, and in fact, did we not have ex-Lotus team boss Matthew Carter on the show before that as well?
Yep, we sure did.
So apologies in advance, but the next podcast after this is the race review and probably the first available podcast review of the season. So forgive us the following hour of dross. Firstly, many thanks to the people who took the time to get in touch over email, Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn after the last weekend. You made our week. We've spent a week reading messages telling us that we're doing a great job. And that, Matt, is just a fantastic way to spend our time during the week.
Yes, I have no complaints about all of the many, many compliments we've received from listeners. And in response to your feedback, I think we planned a show of exquisite awkwardness.
And I'll have to tell you now that not every week is like that. I am reminded of the first week, for example, that Joe Sayward came on and his fans listened to me. In fact, I think I got a message that said something along the lines of, "Dear Spanners, after the first week with Joe, I did not like you. Now I do like you." So hearts and minds, I think we're winning half the battle. But really, Matt, if we were smart, I think we'd just never do another show again. We could just pull a Rosberg. We'll hit 75th in iTunes for Pro Sport. Let's just chuck it in.
Yeah, walk away at the top. Why not?
Or we could have some big dirty news. Big dirty news. All right, Matt. Some dude is walking out of one place and going to another, and this has made a lot of people very mad.
Yeah, this is kind of the biggest and the dirtiest of the news that we have. And it's Laurent Mekies, who has been since 2014 the safety director at the FIA. And beginning in 2017, also deputy race director to Charlie Whiting, who, of course, had lost his longtime deputy race director, Herbie Blash, has decided to depart for golden shores, as it were, for greener pastures. In this case, not so much greener, but redder, shall we say, in Maranello for Ferrari. Now, this has happened not too long ago, you might recall, with Budkowski going to Renault. And after that, there was an enormous hue and cry from all the teams. This is completely wrong. This should not happen again. This is totally unfair. And the FIA was like, yes, you're right. The gardening leave is too short. It should be a proper year now. And yet we're hearing that although he will immediately cease his Formula One duties, he will remain employed at the FIA until June and join Ferrari in September after the summer break. And some people are not happy because not only does that seem like the FIA hasn't really dealt with the issue, but also they are accusing Ferrari of breaking a quote-unquote gentleman's agreement. And that brought up a whole different ball of wax with Martin Brundle. But first, let's hear from our video editor in Australia, Steve.
Well, good morning, all. Most of the comments in the chat room so far have been directed at Sparkles. And John Perry says, why are you cold, Sparkles? Doesn't the central heating pipe work keep you warm?
Because of his terrible background.
And Steve Blackout 19 says, Sparkles, those books still aren't upright.
No, he objectively refuses to do that because teenagers never tidy their room. Yeah,
and I've been away.
Matt, this has actually kicked off quite a storm, but not really for the reasons of the news story. I mean, Martin Brundle took it on Twitter to accuse everybody of being snowflakes for even daring to think that people would think there was such a thing as a gentleman's agreement. So, yeah, it is a little odd that there was nothing written in stone, but I think it was McLaren that have led the chorus of saying, hey, there's something out of order here. But surely it's more a case of, okay, fool me once, fool me twice, it's my fault. They won't just trust Ferrari again with a gentleman's agreement of this nature.
Well, and not only that, but I mean, boy, talking of gentleman's agreement, didn't Mercedes supposedly violate the exact same kind of a pact last season in Spa when they introduced their last spec power unit ahead of the change in the oil burning regulations? I mean, it does seem to be for teams to agree on something and then seeing they could have an advantage, conveniently ignore whatever words they said in the general direction of the rest of the teams.
So what does this prove? It proves that gentlemen's agreements in F1 do not exist. They are just a concept. I mean, even like team and driver contracts aren't worth the paper they're written on. So why would a gentleman's agreement have any value whatsoever?
Well, I think Guido van der Garde might beg to differ with you on that one, and Sauber may have learned its lesson. But on the whole, you're correct. If it's not written down on paper, then it is basically meaningless. And if any team, and this is, what is it? This is one of the things about Formula One. If a team sees an advantage, they will take it. And in this case, for whatever reason, the FIA have yet to update their gardening leave policy, and Ferrari saw an opening and they took it, although they might just see it as payback for what Mercedes did last season.
Any comments in the... Sorry, Steve.
Yeah.
I think, we're just working out the lag, aren't we, between here and Australia? It is the other side of the globe, to be fair. Just it looked like you were trying to get my attention for a chat room comment there.
Steve Blackout says gentlemen's agreements in F1 are effectively meaningless, and we all know they are. But it's a bit like McLaren saying they have the best chassis. It's easy to say, but they've got to prove it now. And Rob Graham says he likes my Led Zeppelin T-shirt, so there you go.
But Matt, surely everyone would have learned after the FIA's guy went to Renault. I mean, is the FIA just a terrible place to work, or has everyone suddenly figured out that there's this wealth of employees that have all the information from all the teams, and they're just throwing infinite money at them?
I think it's the latter. I think they've realized that they can afford to pay salaries that the FAA can't, and as a result, they much like they do with teams when they encounter hard times, they're just picking up talent wherever they can find it. And in this case, being safety director, he will be well acquainted with the details of all of the chassis that are going to be run for the 2018 season, which may offer Ferrari some big help with their development for the following season.
So I take it, Sparkles, you are in Team Brundle here, which is they shouldn't be entering or putting any weight behind these agreements whatsoever. For example, things like oil burning, and we definitely won't use traction control, we promise.
I think if you don't have it down in the regulations, then the teams aren't going to abide by it. And that is exactly what they're supposed to do. This is ruthless competition. That gentleman agreement doesn't work in any sport. It's the point of the sport.
Well, Matt, we have another item as well. I think we're going to delve into the world of technology.
Indeed, let's. And much like we've had our first big political controversy of the year, we've had already our first big technical controversy of the year, and that would be the technical directive that warns the teams not to engage, quote, false engine maps to blow the rear wing. Now, in case you're wondering which teams might be up to this, and you'd probably be thinking Red Bull, because they just sort of, much like the boy who cried wolf, they have been guilty of many things quite often. But in this case, going back to testing, it was actually proper Team Renault that were heat-proofing the bottom of their rear wing and also running their exhaust at the maximum allowed angle. So very much this would seem to be aimed at Team Renault. And in terms of blowing, what we mean here is that they will continue to run the engine off throttle and use the exhaust to aid the downforce. This is very similar to what Red Bull did with their exhaust blown diffuser. And in fact, they changed the regulations so you couldn't put the exhaust down there anymore to aid the diffuser. But Renault had figured that if they do it just right, they can get similar gains by running the exhaust underneath the rear wing. And that's what they're trying to do. But the Charlie Whiting has said, if we catch you running the engine like that, that you will have run afoul of the regulations, which aren't really regulations because they're only technical directives, and technically they don't count until they go to court or the World Motorsport Congress passes them as proper regulations.
Now, obviously, I understood all of that, and actually my opinions fairly much align with yours if you gave any. But Sparkles, I'd be interested in your take.
Well, I'd love to know why the FIA hates exhaust blown anything so much. I loved the exhaust blown diffuser when it was, at its peak in sort of 2010, 11, and a little bit beyond that to some degree as well. I think it made an awesome sound. The cars were fantastically quick without, adding that aerodynamic deficiency. Because, there's that general rule, aerodynamics, it makes the racing worse. So here's a way of us getting more downforce without making the racing worse. I would love to know why they hate it so much. I think it's genius.
Yeah, but Matt, I mean, they did kind of advertise it by putting a massive heat shield on the rear wing, sort of asking for trouble, aren't they? They've invited the challenge, have they not?
Yeah, well, it's kind of hard. Unlike other things, it's kind of hard to disguise your rear wing melting during testing. So they were either only going to run 4 or 5 laps at a time, or they're going to have to put a heat shield on the bottom of it to keep the exhaust from causing trouble. But as far as your comment, I think the reason they want to chase down the off throttle blowing is, number one, it's not economical in terms of it uses extra fuel, and number two, and this is what the FIA often does, is they identify an avenue and they feel like the teams will spend lots of money chasing those gains, so they will want to shut it down as quickly as possible.
Well, really, we'd hate to have teams spending a long time, say, chasing down aerodynamics all season long and spending millions and millions of pounds on that. That doesn't seem like joined up thinking. On the one hand, yes, we want to shut down when a team gets a head start, but we are happy to have an inherent cost base where we have people running wind tunnels, bringing updates mid-session, doing 3D prints at trackside. That just seems like a false economy, doesn't it? Maybe if they let a lot of these innovations come through, it would take the pressure off this huge aero industry that's built up.
Yeah, it might, but the teams, here's the thing, the teams will always find a way to spend the money. So if they're not chasing exhaust blown rear wings, they're going to be chasing the other interesting technical thing, of course, would be Ferrari's placement of the breather pipe. So there will always be a thing for them to chase with money. Someone will have done a thing. Everyone will chase it. They'll go, why did they do that? We saw a bunch of brand new Ferrari-looking side pods at the beginning of the season, didn't we? How much do you suppose the team spent chasing that as part of their development cycle? Yeah, it's an inevitable game that gets played. I would guess, if you want a proper response to that, it would be simply for reasons of the environment and efficiency, because you're going to be using more fuel to keep the engine running higher off throttle. But the reality is they've determined that they don't want the teams doing it, so they're going to shut it down. But that does bring us to the other interesting technical controversy, and that's your favorite shot of the smoking Ferrari and emerging in clouds of burning oil. Now we know that the regulations were changed so that you could no longer vent oil vapors back into the crankcase for reasons of they put a bunch of additives in it to make the engines run better, more powerful, use less fuel. So now they have to vent these vapors, and most of the teams have chosen to do this by the exhaust. Ferrari, however, have run a breather pipe all the way down to the end of the rain light, and there's now a great deal of speculation as to why exactly they've done it, what possible advantage it must be, and, of course, the best question, which is why on earth does a Ferrari produce polluting clouds of noxious vapor when it starts, and none of the other teams do?
Chris Stevens, one of these kids, is not like the other. What are Ferrari up to? Are they not sticking to the gentleman's agreement of not burning oil?
I mean, when it was a gentleman's agreement, no way. Now that it's in a technical regulation, then they kind of have to that degree. But I've no doubt that the teams will, find some sort of loophole. I mean, they're even controlling the thickness of the oil between qualifying and the race to make sure that people aren't using that power mode in qualifying and things like that. Specifically, what Ferrari are up to, I'm probably not the guy to ask. You're probably better off talking to Summers about something like that. Maybe he's got a clue once he's back from the US.
Well, actually, you could just talk to me, because it's not like I don't know anything. Although, to be fair, in this case, I got the information from Summers, so Sure. And this all started with Scarbs, who drew a quick picture to show how it worked last year, where most of the teams were, and what Ferrari were up to this year. My initial speculation would have been that because you have oil coming out near the diffuser, that they were either going to use it to try and add some downforce onto the monkey seat, or they were going to try and use it to aid the efficiency of the diffuser. But Summers has pointed out that what they might actually be doing is using the diffuser itself as a kind of vacuum to help get oil vapors out of the engine without using any additional power or devices. And that, unlike many of the other teams, they might not be using a catchment for the oil, that they might simply be burning it and blowing it straight out the back. And as to their final gains, that might help with a little bit with engine efficiency and a little bit with cooling, but might also help convince the FIA to change their minds about being forced to vent the oil vapors altogether, because it is more efficient to capture them and reuse them.
Rob Graham reckons the reason they're doing it is so that they can give Hammy an oil slick during the race.
Well, they've got to
send
get
him off.
They've got to get in front first.
Well, he's possibly right. Peter Yannick, I hope I got that right, says there ought to be a new rule for 2018, and that's a championship for the team that uses the least oil during the year. And Steve Blackout says Ferrari are sponsored by Philip Morris but can't put a name on the car, so huge clouds of smoke are the answer. Very subtle, I thought.
Very sneaky. Very sneaky Ferrari. But while we've got Steve Amy, our video guy, let's find out a little bit about him. Steve, what's it like teaching us three idiot producers to put together a weekly video show and then dealing with the aftermath of it in the edit?
It's a slow process and it'll take a little time, but it's getting there. That's pretty good. The aftermath of what's going on during the live stream is sometimes hard to cover up, but we manage it one way or another. It's what I've got to get you guys to do is to begin to think in pictures. You think as in audio, and that's all fine. But now there's another element to the whole thing, and that's just experience. But it's fun. I laugh myself gutless while I'm editing. But I'm not complaining.
So with the audio, if I say something terrible or litigious even, I can just quickly whip it out of the audio. But now with the video, I have to message you as well. Steve, please keep me out of jail with an edit at 40 minutes and 10 seconds.
Don't worry, I make certain I keep copious notes just in case you don't remember to message me.
Now, Steve, we're actually very happy to have you because you are, in fact, a professional video producer.
Yeah, that's what I do during the day. I have a small video production company and we make television commercials and corporate videos and training videos and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, wow. Well, what a find for Missed Apex. Steve, it's good to have you finally here in voice and not being as aggressive as you normally are post-show when you're telling me what an idiot I am. But that's nice because it's a family show, so none of that would make the cut. And thank you very much for minding our chat room. Now, Chris, Stroll has been making noises, as is his wont, and he feels like Williams have sorted out their downforce issues. Obviously, Paddy Lowe's then come and put a bit of cold water on that and said, well, we've got sort of up to where we should have been last year. Is that a case of Lance Stroll being very optimistic? Because we've seen this a few times where he says something super positive and then Williams come out with something to kind of dampen it.
I think it just highlights his inexperience, really, compared to the rest of the field, and certainly compared to a lot of people at the team. The idea that they've sorted out their downforce issue is not borne out in the evidence on track. And the evidence on track is that it's a very difficult car to drive that's quite skittish and aggressive and not as, sort of flowing and nice to drive as the cars, especially at the front of the field.
Yeah, and that's really what I think Lowe highlighted in terms of, particularly he said entry in the corners, they're okay, but the entry into the corners seems to be giving them real problem, and they haven't figured out what the issue is yet. On the good side, if you are a Williams fan, and I assume that everybody in the UK is a Williams fan just by
that's not far wrong. Yeah,
is that he seemed well pleased with the correlation. He didn't seem to think there were any big issues with correlation. So unless there's something inherently wrong with the design, they will at least have a chance of getting on top of it, particularly with Kubica running the simulator for him.
And that's a really important thing, isn't it? Making sure that the correlation is okay, because so many times, it happened to Red Bull at the start of last year, that you design what supposedly is a fantastic car, put it on track, and it's not actually doing anything you expected it to. And that is probably one of the most difficult things and one of the most important things to get right in the initial stages of designing a Formula One car. So yeah, from that perspective, it's a step forward. I think what Lance's comment really goes back to is, it feels better than last year's car. That doesn't mean it's brilliant, because it's not exactly a huge milestone.
And again, what seems to come out of Williams is this kind of understatement and being more impressed with little things than we would want them to be, Matt. You know, we want them to be talking about when they're going to come up again into the podiums, because it wasn't actually that long ago that this was the second best team on the grid. So to hear them kind of talking about, well, you know, it's kind of getting easier to get into the corners than it was last year, and our two rookies aren't going to be slipping and sliding as much as we were with no downforce. It's not really what us UK Williams fans want to hear.
No, and I think it was Mark Hughes wrote an article about Williams, although I could be wrong about that, in which and Chris looks like he already wants to interrupt me. So if it wasn't Mark Hughes, you're welcome to tell me that it wasn't Mark Hughes. But the nut of the article was basically that Williams is still set up with the corporate structure basically of a manufacturer, of a McLaren or a Ferrari or a Mercedes. They have their own gearbox designers, they have their own this. But the reality is, in this day and age, they don't have the income to be that team. They need to be more of a Force India, spending that money incredibly efficiently in order to really be competing with those teams. So they're just inefficient in their spending and their structure. It's almost like a legacy structure, but they've not got to terms with modernizing yet. And this is why they seem to both, at the one hand, they seem to have so much promise, but they ultimately fail to deliver on it because they can't spend the resources where they really need to be spent.
And that comes across on track and in the results, because, I mean, you mentioned that time span as when they had the second best car in 2014. Really was what that was taking advantage of the fact that so many other teams had got that first year of the new regulations so badly wrong. And, you know, they've been slipping back drastically ever since. I mean, I think they were very lucky to finish where they did in 2015, you know, given all the issues that other teams were having.
The panel looks like it's in agreement there. So I will move on now. But first, I'd like to make an appeal on behalf of Smile with City. We all have busy lives, and we often worry about the most trivial of things. I know I do. Sometimes it's whether the house is clean or whether we'll be able to get the kids to school on time. These concerns all fade into insignificance when we realise how often we take for granted the most important things of all, our children's health. Sadly, some parents aren't so lucky. On the 28th of January 2013, a boy called Siddy, but to his parents, sadly lost his fight to an aggressive form of childhood cancer called neuroblastoma. Now, what I understand is that this is a form of cancer where the symptoms come up before the child is able to express them. Therefore, by the time you get a diagnosis, the cancer has already spread. Crippled with grief, his parents bravely set up the charity Smile with Siddy to help spread awareness of neuroblastoma and fund its research. On Sunday, the 13th of May, 12 exam ninjas, the folks bringing you this podcast at the top of the show, will be running the Bristol 10K to raise funds for Smile with Siddy. All that they're asking for is a small donation to help Smile with Siddy fund their valuable work. Now then, I have a link for you if I scroll down. If you would like to help and make a donation or find out more, go to examninja.co.uk/smile. That's examninja.co.uk/smile. I cannot imagine what it's like to deal with that. I kiss the ground every day that my kids have made it as far as they have, so strong. And I know that not every parent is as lucky. Now then, Matt, I'm going to talk enthusiastically about tyres, and I'm going to once again try and shake off this myth that somehow I'm not into them or I don't find them exciting. Now, I don't find their chemical makeup exciting. I don't find the politics of it that exciting, but I do like the strategy element that it brings. And I think bringing 3 tyres into it made a real difference. I think if we lost this element of different tyres and we just went into an out-and-out tyre war, I think we'd be missing something from modern Formula One. So let's stop telling me that I get bored when we talk about tyres. I get bored when you talk about tyres.
Good, then I shall talk about tires.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, no, well, I was going to say, because we have, of course, the selections for the teams for Australia. And not surprisingly, it's the ultra soft party. For those of you who are playing along at home, these would be the purple tires. The Mercedes has taken 9, Ferrari has taken 7, and Red Bull has taken 8. And that's pretty much all the teams have gone there. Entertainingly, Hamilton has opted for only one set of the yellow soft tires, which is the hardest tire on offer, and 3 of the supers. And Bottas, for those of you playing at home, have a drink, has opted for 2 of the soft and 2 of the super soft. And in fact, Lewis has been very aggressive. The only other person taking a single set of softs would be Sirotkin and Grosjean. Everybody else has at least 2 softs. So he won't be able to use them. Basically, he's either going to use them in practice and not at all during the race, or he will save them for the race in case he needs them. Seems a bit of a gamble if you ask me, but well, there you go.
Well,
it could make a very interesting Australia.
Well, that's because, Sirotkin's got them because in Mother Russia, the tires wear out you. But Hamilton is probably quite happy, I think, on that Mercedes that the softs and mediums could probably run a race distance from what we've seen in testing over the last 4 years. So expect him to strap on an ultra soft for qualifying, go 6 laps, and then the rest of the race, Chris.
I mean, I saw some comments after that tyre selection was revealed, sort of suggesting that the ultra soft is still too hard then. But I don't think that's really quite the case, because you've got to remember they'll use probably 4, 5, 6 of those sets just in qualifying, and they'll probably want to reserve one for the race as well. So I wouldn't just jump in too soon and before we said that they're too hard, because frankly they're a step softer than what they were a year ago.
Steve, microphones are fantastic devices. You do, however, have to unmute them to enable the link from your mouth to the listener.
Sorry about that. My stuff up.
No, you're a rookie. You're a rookie. You're a rookie in the end zone, Steve. It's our own fault.
Okay. Now, Rob Graham reckons that we should fix this whole tyre debate and make it exciting and have a system where every team has to use retreads during the race at least once.
See, people do want the tyres to fail.
Yeah, of course they do. I mean, it used to be fairly boring back in the days when you could do a whole race on one set of tyres. I mean, in those days it was Ferrari. They'd get in the front and no one had a chance to catch them ever. So I like the way the tyres are built to degrade.
Unless you're a Ferrari fan, both of you. So, in the UK, anyway. Now, Matt, we do remember the olden days that Steve is talking about. Obviously, Steve can remember more olden days than we can. But it has become an integral part of the strategy. And actually, I'm not hearing people whinge about chocolate tyres at all. I'm just not hearing it, even though the overall wear rates are, yes, it's not 4 pit stops a race, but it has become part of the fabric of what we're doing.
Yeah, and I think that's because the degradation has become a little bit more predictable for the teams, which is part of the problem. And then the other part of the problem was because the teams really didn't know what they were going to do, there was very little, the teams weren't pushing, the drivers weren't pushing as hard because they were constantly trying to save the tires. And I think the difference is now they have a better idea of where that edge is. And so they're willing to go a bit harder in those 5 or 10 laps that are really critical to winning the race.
But Chris, we've lost the absolute cliff edge where the cars were stopping on track and then limping back to the pit stop because their tyres just wouldn't grip anymore. If we've got a linear progression of lap times, it becomes much more tactical. Actually, it becomes something we can follow.
Actually, I wouldn't say that sort of cliff face has gone. It just takes a lot longer to get there, and the fact that the drivers can still push on those tires, that was the real issue over the last couple of years, was that nobody wanted to get near another car because of it. So Pirelli have sort of solved that issue.
But Chris, isn't a cliff that gradually gets to the bottom, isn't that a hill rather than a cliff?
No, I'm not saying it gradually gets there. I'm saying it just takes longer. The walk to the cliff face is just a little bit longer. It's a nice 1 hour stroll rather than a 5 minute, jog.
Right. So the practical implication of this, and if we think about what happened at Mercedes last year, if we look at the number of softs that Hamilton brought,
Oh, the cops are coming for you, Matt.
yeah. It's just some bad timing there. Sorry about that.
All right, Chris, you hide the stash. Matt, you burn the map, and we'll meet back at Vinny's place in 20 minutes.
Done. It must have been a very bad thing. I get a lot of that when I'm not talking, but thankfully the noise gate keeps it from making it onto the show. I would say, looking at Mercedes' choice, probably they're betting on a two-stopper at this point, because it's the first race of the year, because nobody really quite knows what's going to happen. And if you look at the tire allocations, that doesn't look like we're going to run 20 laps on the ultras and then switch to the softs for the other 38 laps. That looks like they're planning to run ultra, super, or ultra soft or something like that.
So then, Chris, why no Hypersoft?
I guess because they don't want to take this brand new tire somewhere where it might only last 5 laps. That was kind of the situation we were seeing in sort of 2013 sort of era, and I don't think that. I think that's an extreme of what we're going for, and not something we want to sort of go back to. And it being a new tire, I think introducing it at Russia makes a lot of sense, where you basically get no tire wear.
Speaking of making sense, what's the chat room saying there, Steve?
They're not making any sense whatsoever.
They're all drunk, that's why.
Is that what it is? Rob Graham said, Pirelli brings rainbows to F1, and then our very own Trumpets has sort of jumped into the chat room and said, now they just need sparkles as well. So we need a set of sparkles tyres.
Woo!
And Rick Buxton, who's just jumped in, says, a 5-minute jog to tyre mediocrity. That's what it is.
All right then, Matt. I think you've had enough fun with tyres. I'm going to take tyres away from you, except to say, actually, we are making the assumption that it's going to be dry tyres. Have you heard anything about the weather for the weekend? Seeing as this is probably as close as we're going to get to an official Australia preview for Missed Apex.
Oh, I thought you were asking Steve because he's in Australia. That
would make a lot more sense, actually. Should we just do that? Steve, how's the weather?
From what I hear, the weather is going to be fine on Friday, chance of rain on Saturday, and a chance of rain on Sunday too. So that could actually put a Spaniard or a Spanners in the works. For all of the tyre planning they've done, it could be out the window. In which case, so is Merck's advantage, I think.
I love it when a good plan
rains.
I love it when a good plan is completely wasted. Tell me about teams finding the funny side of that horrible abomination on the F1 card. How dare you have a sense of humour about the Halo, the worst thing ever. 50% of Twitter is never watching Formula One again because of this Halo, Matt, and McLaren have the audacity to make a feature of it.
Yeah, they went out and shockingly found a sponsor for the Halo, at least. And the sponsor was a corporation called Gandy's, which makes, naturally enough, flip-flops. And I just got to ask at this point, much like everything else I use in my life, do they call them something completely different in the UK, like shovel shoes?
Yes, no. We call them Flumacum sandwiches, of course. But I'm surprised it's taken this long for somebody to adopt the flip-flop tag and run with it. But, they seem to have a lot of fun with it. And Alonso's definitely sort of seen the funny side of himself. He knows how memeable he is.
There's nothing to the rumor that Red Bull might be getting Victoria's Secret to be their Halo sponsor.
Get out.
No, of course not. But I mean, you got to admit that would be.
Do you know what?
There we go.
If you'd have said
light bulb above, the little fluorescent zzz above your head go off there.
If you'd have said Mercedes, I'd have gone, oh no, don't be stupid. But you go Red Bull, you go, Maybe.
Maybe. I don't know.
Chris, a genius marketing move, a bit cringy, because I know you're a bit of a cool kid. So, like, for example, when Lucas Di Grassi did his pre-race dab at the Formula E, you wouldn't have approved of that at all. Where'd you land on this?
I'm kind of a bit indifferent about it. I mean, to me, honestly, the first thing that came into my mind was, wow, McLaren have managed to get a sponsor. That's brilliant. You know, didn't even occur to me the flip flop and the thing. It sounds like a really good April Fool's joke, though, doesn't it?
But Matt, this has exposed what we were talking about last week, I think, which is that the Halo is a really great place to have a sponsor. Not only on the outside, but if we're going to have visor cams, I mean, what would you pay to have Missed Apex podcast on the inside of someone's Halo?
Yeah, no, it's a lot of good new revenue space for the teams to sell. And following McLaren's lead, I would guess that you're going to see people starting to try and take advantage of that with specialty sponsors.
Okay. The chat room have got some opinions about all this. Sam Watley says that the have flip-flopped for years, and eventually they had to make it onto the car, which is quite true. And MS Sports Engineering says Alonso now has shoes for when he's in his Renault beach chair, when he's parked at the side of the road, which is going to happen. I'll be surprised if any of the Maccas make it to the finish line in Melbourne. I'll be greatly surprised. And Hilmi Fowzl says he likes what McLaren did with the flip-flop.
And Artemy there's also pointing out that Eddie Jordan would definitely have done the Victoria's Secret. Yeah, well, you've made me blush there, Matt, because I think I fell for that. I think you can count that as a gotcha. So let's move on then, because speaking of sponsors, Matt, the Russians are coming.
Yeah, indeed they are. And this actually is not a new problem for Russians and Russian sponsorship. However, given the Russian government allegedly behaving rather badly in your country, the issue of sanctions is once again being brought up, and specifically the problem is SMP Racing. Now, back in 2014, we had the U.S. sanctioning the Russians and the EU going along with it. And there are two brothers behind SMP Bank. And the reason I'm talking about SMP Bank is because they are sponsors not only of a FIA WEC team and a whole stable of drivers, but most specifically, they are longtime sponsors of Sergei Sirotkin, who is currently in his race seat thanks to the generous benefits of being associated with them. And back in 2014, younger brother, where did I lose? I lost the name. Rottenberg. Arkady Rottenberg was indeed blacklisted, and that caused him some trouble. But his older brother was not blacklisted and currently lives on the French Riviera in the kind of style that you'd think someone with that sort of money would tend to live. However, his name was on the original list that was vetted, and supposedly the EU will be again looking at possible sanctions. And if these sanctions are imposed, Sirotkin is suddenly not going to have the money for his drive. And if he doesn't have the money for his drive, well, I don't know who could possibly be stepping in.
I still can't get over the comment you made, Matt, when we were responding to Paddy Lowe, talking about, well, no, the engineers, they did it blind. They had the lap times there, they had all the telemetry, and they made the decision, completely blind between the drivers. And you went, yeah, but Stroll's figures weren't included in that. And it would be not funny, but it would be interesting to see if indeed Kubica was very quickly shuffled into that seat if the money went away. Because wouldn't that completely just destroy everything we've heard coming out of Williams if we hear news about these sponsors you're talking about and then suddenly the young Russian is out of there and Robert's in?
Yeah, and this is not to take anything away from Sirotkin or his ability, or whether or not, all other things being equal, he deserved the seat. But this is an issue that was written about in 2014, it's coming back because of the politics of the whole thing. And yeah, it would very much, it would be a difficult PR position for Williams to be in, to insist that money had nothing to do with Sirotkin's choice, and then when he lacked the money, to give the seat to Kubica. Not that that's happened or it's going to happen, but yeah, hypothetically speaking, if we reach that particular bridge, they are going to be burning it down.
I'll tell you what then, Matt. We're getting towards Australia. Let's hear the podium music. Nice and early, so we can talk about a preview of the Australian Grand Prix and who we think is going to make that podium. Now, who better to talk about the venue and the track in Australia land than the upside-down master of missed Apex video, Steve Amy. Have you been to this racetrack, Steve?
Many, many times. Up until a couple of years ago, I lived about half a mile from it. And I've used to drive through it every day, virtually, when it's not being used for Formula One. And I've been to the race there many, many times and enjoyed them all. It's not a bad track, a bit bumpy, and some of the surfacing a little bit questionable, but it makes for an exciting race. And it was always fun to have the first one, as my home Grand Prix.
Now, my ambition for this season is to get to 2 Grand Prix. I think I'm definitely going to go to the British Grand Prix, not for race day, but for the practice sessions, take the lad there and have a look around. Unfortunately, Australia isn't going to make the list because it's too soon and it's far too far away. I think it's 17 planes before you get to Australia. But do you really kind of sense that F1 starting carnival kind of atmosphere on day one of the F1 season?
Oh, you feel it even before day one. The town begins to kind of get quite, buzzy about it all, at least a week before. I mean, they're installing a track for, like 6 or 8 weeks before the actual race. So, you can see all this activity going on, and people in town are all getting, excited about it. And there's bunting up in town, and they put some stalls up in the middle of the railway stations in town and sell F1 merchandise prior to the race. So, yeah, there's a really great feel about it. I think Melbourne does it really well, turns it into a carnival.
We'll have to get you down there with some missed Apex merchandise. But Chris, what about the track itself? What on earth is it? I don't really understand what it is trying to be. People love it. People don't want to see it gone. But is it a street circuit? It is kind of reminiscent of Valencia, if you want to look at it like that. It definitely has things in common with Barcelona. When you look at turn 1, you go through that first section and you think you're on a Grand Prix circuit, and then suddenly you feel like you're in the middle of a street circuit. Tell us about the track itself.
Well, as Steve mentioned, it's quite bumpy, and that immediately is going to highlight a few issues with some of the cars, as it so often does. But it's mainly about traction. There's a lot of stress on the rear tires. There's a lot of traction zones where you're having to steer the car at the same time, and sort of depending on how good your rear end is, then that's going to really hurt your tires in the race as well. So it is all about the rear. It has got quite a street circuit feel to it.
So if you've got a good rear end, you're good for longer, which just shows why I'm so good looking as I approach my 40s. But Matt, you've been looking at a few things that we're going to expect from Australia, or did you want to comment on the track further?
58 laps, slightly over 300 kilometers, 16 turns. The biggest braking events are into turn 15, where you go from 220 to 90 kilometers, and the one that always catches everybody out, turn 3, where you're going from 315 to 110 kilometers. I believe Lewis Hamilton had the fast time in qualifying, a 122.188. And in the race, it was Vettel, Hamilton, Bottas, the top 3, followed by Raikkonen, Verstappen, and your favorite driver, Massa.
So actually, while you're talking about that, this track does have a few corners that catch people out. So before the final right-hander, there's that very tight left-hander. Is that what you were talking about with the hardest braking zone?
No, actually, turn 3 is the hardest braking zone because you're going from 315 kilometers down to 110, a difference of over 200 kilometers. The next close is, you were correct, that's turn 15, where you go from 220 to 90, and that's a slightly more than 90 degree that sets you up for the little chicane to come back, for the little turn to come back onto the straight. The straight is a DRS zone, and between turn 2 and 3 is the DRS zone, with the DRS detection being directly before turn 4.
But I know we've got a lot of sim racers who listen to this and a lot of gamers, and that one always catches me out because you've got the double right-hander before that penultimate turn, and you're still turning and still desperately trying to get back on the racing line before braking, and, well, that catches me out. Anyway, and in fact, we do see a lot of F1 drivers as well going off that penultimate turn as well. So it's a very challenging track, and it's a good one to start the season off with, except that... Well, okay, I'll finish my own point then. Except that one of the things that I listed in the notes as expecting to see on Australia is unrepresentative results. Australia always seems to throw up things that we kind of go, ooh, but then it doesn't continue. McLaren on podiums, for example.
Yeah, or Mercedes eating its tires, which is how we came to have Vettel winning the race last year. And that was what I was going to bring up anyway. So very nice anticipation.
We're like
there.
one. It's like we're on this, like twins, like podcast twins.
Yeah. Chris, go ahead. That was it.
I thought you were going to mention a thing. Sorry.
I did. I mentioned Mercedes having trouble with its tires, and that's how Vettel won.
Oh, I thought you were elaborating on that. Excuse me. I thought you were elaborating on it.
It's almost like you're busy on your phone and not paying attention to the show.
Kids these days, honestly.
Or Felipe Nasr getting points finish on his debut in the Sauber. That was another one. But you bring up a good point. I wouldn't necessarily call it strictly unrepresentative. Certainly, less representative than you'll get at a track like Barcelona, for example. But certainly, if you're quick in Australia and then you're quick at the following round in China, then that's a very, very good sign for the season.
Isn't it Bahrain second?
No, Bahrain is third, I believe.
Okay, fair enough. But yeah, no, you make a good point. Yes, if you're good over the first 3 races.
Well, it's another very different kind of circuit from the 2 before it. So you sort of have these blocks of very different tracks. And if you're, consistently good in all of them, then you've got a very versatile car.
Tell you what, Trumpets, what else are you expecting to see in Australia?
Yes, well, you had mentioned the movie 10 Things I Hate About You, or somebody had. And so I had this idea of 10 things we will hate in Australia, or we will see in Australia.
Someone accused me of being unromantic. That's why I brought that up. I was like, I have seen 10 Things I Hate About You several times.
Oh, see, there you go. And it is an excellent movie. Heath Ledger all the way. Hoorah. Okay, but top of my list, we will not see Mercedes win in Australia.
Ooh, do you agree with that, Sparkles?
I think it's plausible because Renault's engine deficit is not going to be as prominent on a circuit like this. So there's that to contend with, but where Ferrari fits into the equation, that's going to be really interesting to see as well.
Steve Blackout points out that Australia is proof that F1 cars can drive upside down, and I can tell him that that's exactly right. And he's not sure why this question keeps being asked all the time.
That's a reference to the F1 car in a tunnel scenario, driving upside down in a tunnel.
The thing is, I hear that about everything these days. Even some of the Formula cars in the 750 Motor Club, people claim that can be driven on a ceiling.
Is there anywhere we could actually test this out?
I will talk to some of the drivers and get this locked down.
Hang on a minute. With the people we've had on the show, I'm sure Joe Saywood has been given an F1 car as memorabilia at some point. And Matthew Carter's got to have Kimi Raikkonen's Lotus kicking about in his shed there. Now then, Matt, you were talking about not having a Mercedes win. Okay, these things do happen. I mean, 2014, Lewis Hamilton had a fuel pump go, or was it a spark plug or something, and he couldn't get very far off the grid. So on reliability, these things might happen if that's what you're alluding to. But on pure pace, Trumpets, I can't see anything other than Mercedes turning up, ruining Martin Brundle's afternoon in Q3. And I will say, to counter your point, that Lewis Hamilton will be half a second clear in Q3 of the next non-Mercedes car.
And that has nothing really at all to do with winning the race, because he was about that in qualifying last year and managed to not win because they had the extra stop because he thought his tires were going off.
Yes.
And to me, this is where we had, I know Chris had said that it was just Bottas doing burnouts to make Pirelli, make Pirelli,
I didn't say that.
tires. Yes, you did.
I did not say that.
And Bahrain is also the second race, but whatever. I'm not going to get into this argument right now.
Yes.
They swap it every year.
They swap it every year. Yeah, anybody could make that mistake. Anybody can make that mistake. It's okay. These things happen. But Mercedes seem to be, if they have an issue, it's tires. And if they have a tire issue in Australia, it always seems to be worse for them. And it's because partly, I think, due to the nature of the surface, partly due to the temperature, but mostly due to just it's a brand new tire on an unrepresentative circuit. So they're forced out of their comfort zone when it comes to decision making, and they tend to be a bit conservative, and that opens the doors for other teams.
I think you might have nailed it there, Matt. It's not that they are tactically bad in any way, but yes, perhaps they are conservative. And I think we did see that, particularly in 2016. Obviously, no one was really threatening them then. And at the beginning of 2017. But I think they woke up to that because in the second half of the season, they seemed to get that drumbeat of strategy calls correct. So I'm not as pessimistic as you. Perhaps they might have shaken that off. And perhaps 2017, the early season, remember, they hadn't been challenged for 3 years.
Yeah, and in 2017 was the start of basically a brand new chassis regulations. So they would have been much more out to sea last year than they would be this year. Still, I feel like it's important to at least give the viewing public some hope that it won't just be, 19 Mercedes victories and then maybe a crash or something.
Well, I mean, if you're assuming that people aren't Mercedes fans and they don't want Lewis Hamilton to win, obviously we do want good racing. But I tell you what I got upset about. People who think that if there's no race at the front, there's no race whatsoever. I mean, I still think about 2013. And as somebody who was following Lewis Hamilton very closely, 2013 was not really a season that he was in after Silverstone. But if you look at the races in, I'm going to go out on a limb, I think Korea, where he was dicing with Hulkenberg. In fact, he had quite a few good top midfield dices with Nico Hulkenberg. There's a lot going on down in the midfield. But it takes kind of Lewis Hamilton being there for the cameras to get on and do it. So maybe when Lewis Hamilton is out there dominating, there's less focus on the teams at the back. Steve, are you trying to get my attention, boss?
Yeah, I've got a few comments here.
Go for it.
Artemy X says that Hamilton's going to win. The rest of the podium has 4 solid contenders for 2 remaining places, and he says it's hard to choose. Dash NN says that Merc will be first, Ferrari second, Red Bull, and then Renault, Haas, and McLaren will be sort of down the back, which I agree.
It's nearly entirely wrong, but we'll go through that when you're finished.
And Lancia Delta Racing says that pursuing a conservative approach is tactically very bad, so everyone should just go flat out from the start.
Wow, I mean, you can criticise Mercedes all you want. They did win the championship last year, and the year before, and the year before that, and the year before that. Let's just go through that order that Steve just mentioned there. So Mercedes up at the front. Okay, so let's abandon the championship for a moment. Let's just talk about Australia. Team-wise, car-wise. Mercedes up at the front. Yeah, sure. I think the smart money's there. Ferrari second. Chris, no way. Not a chance. Red Bull are going to come out there as the main contenders for Mercedes' crown in Australia.
I mean, this is certainly the general consensus, and they do have a big update for the first race of the season as well. So that is, they're certainly favourite to be the challengers. We don't really know where Ferrari fits into this equation, and we'll get the answer for that in Melbourne. But especially seeing as from what we've seen in testing, that element of having a car with a nice wide operating window seems to be a characteristic that they have maintained. But of course, we'll get a better idea of that as the season progresses.
And Matt, there is a gap down to fourth. So I think whichever team isn't second will be third out of those two. But the commenter's wrong again, isn't he there? Saying, oh, by the way, hello, NN. Welcome to the chat room. I'm not using your comment as just a thing to rip apart for the sake of content. Aside, I am doing that. Renault fourth, I've got this bet with Anil where I think that Renault will be beaten by Force India. Let's put our cards on the table. Still an unreliable engine compared to the front two. Possibly going to have their toys taken away with their rear diffuser. Perhaps they shouldn't have advertised it with a fireproof rear wing. Renault, I just don't have the confidence in them overall that they are somehow going to be the team that can be the best of a talented field of Formula One teams.
Yeah, and it's not because from a driver point of view, I think they are close to the talent of Force India.
Yeah,
from
very
a
little
chassis
argument.
point of view, I believe they're ahead of Force India. However, the weakness for Renault is the power unit, and it was massively unreliable. They're behind on their ERS development cycle, and the only Renault power unit that has consistently been able to trouble for a podium is the one that's in the back of the Red Bull, which, as we know, will be running a different spec fuel and oil this year, and is very thoroughly optimized by the extra several $100 million available to Red Bull through their technology center. Now, you talk about Mercedes being at the front like it's a done deal, but I will say Australia is a one-off. It happens to be the home race for Ricciardo. So I will go out on a limb and look for him to take it to Mercedes.
Hey, a home victory would be good, wouldn't it?
And I'd say if it's wet, I'd say Verstappen would be even money in that situation, because the aero package that Red Bull had at the end of last season was beyond the pale compared to Ferrari or Mercedes.
Okay, so let me caveat a lot of what I'm saying in general and what I've been saying in the pre-season with Australia. Yes, that's one thing, but Bahrain, China, certainly. So when you're saying, yes, we're saying it's a lock-in that Mercedes are going to win, I mean, I really am much more confident about Bahrain, China than I am for Australia. And that applies as well with the Force India Renault battle that I've constructed in my head. Because, I mean, Chris, we know Toto has said now the teams are definitely going to have all the same engine modes because they've always had the same engine modes. So Force India, how can they fail?
I mean, the fact that they're in a spot of bother at the moment financially, and the fact that we haven't properly seen their 2018 car on track yet, I think that's probably going to hinder them in the first few races. I mean, both teams have got major setbacks. So it's right, basically then, who gets it the least wrong.
I'll ask you this then. This is true. Talking about the least wrong then. In the hybrid era, what's the worst a Mercedes-powered team has done?
That's a really good question, actually. Yeah. I mean, probably...
Do you remember 2014, I think? Basically, Williams got a head start on everybody, and they basically had a car that had no aero, and it was just, 14 rocket launches a lap. And that did well enough. Now, I think people are starting to underestimate, again, what a huge advantage the Mercedes power unit gives you.
I mean, certainly in 2014, it was, they got a massive jump start on everyone. I think that's less of the case now. It certainly still is the case a little bit. But I would have said, the McLaren, that was the worst one. But probably Williams takes that role now.
Right. You're still asking about the power unit, the worst one?
Yeah.
Yeah. Really, it was McLaren, but more because they lacked operational stability.
Oh, and we know they were using a different fuel as well, against the advice of Mercedes.
As I said.
What? Are you ready for a next controversial prediction?
I am.
Toro Rosso will beat McLaren, and neither McLaren will finish.
That's a big shout, and it's Australia. I think the second thing you said there is more likely, and of course Steve Amy did allude to that as well. Neither McLaren finishing is likely, given the gremlins they've had throughout testing, yes, they did manage to pull together a last nice day. But when you have that many failures throughout the course of testing compared to the other teams who have been relatively stable, so it's not like 2014, you have to think then a Grand Prix distance, a Grand Prix weekend, it's not inconceivable that both of them could putt out. But let's assume, let's give this to Chris, let's assume both McLarens finish the race and nothing just falls off. Do you expect them to beat Toro Rosso?
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, I would say that the Honda power unit, in terms of performance, still is lacking a little bit compared to the others, and you certainly would expect McLaren to be able to put a better car together than Toro Rosso, given the histories. Whether that's the case this year, that's another matter entirely. But I would be surprised if Toro Rosso beat McLaren on pace.
So Matt, I'm thinking a lot of your prediction is coming from the fact that Toro Rosso have just gotten out of Honda's way and said, do you know what? You've been frustrated for 3 years. We're just going to let you put it where you want. And everyone's happy when that's said.
Yeah, I think if there's going to be a failure with Toro Rosso, it's going to be the fact that they have two brand new, relatively inexperienced drivers.
Yeah.
If they had Carlos Sainz and Kvyat back behind the wheel, I would really see Toro Rosso, as they did when Sainz was driving for them, challenging quite regularly in the midfield. And I do believe that the reliability of the McLaren is going to be why the Toro Rossos will finish ahead of them.
Hey.
They might have ultimate pace over one lap, but I'm really not convinced over the course of the whole race. And let's face it, Chris is arguing right now that what amounts to a factory works team is going to be beaten by a customer team.
Interesting.
And the third customer, the lowest down customer, Red Bull, Renault, McLaren's the bottom of the heap of Renault power unit customers right now.
Sparkles, what of your journalistic integrity now?
Customers beating other manufacturers is not exactly something new at the moment. I mean, we've literally just spent half this show talking about how Williams had the second best car as a customer.
And Williams beat Mercedes how many times?
Yeah, you were talking about the other manufacturers, though.
Oh,
yeah, so tell me a customer team that's beating a manufacturer team regularly.
Red Bull.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that one.
Red Bull did not beat Ferrari. Red Bull did not beat Mercedes.
What are you talking? Are you talking about the customers of the same manufacturers? Are you talking about other manufacturers? You're switching every time I say something. I'm talking about
any customer team versus any manufacturer team. There were three manufacturers. The only one you could make that argument for technically would be Renault. And I had to make it for you.
I literally have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
I hate it when Chris is right, but I think he might be in this scenario. Steve, in fact, before we go to Steve's predictions for Australia, where are you guys on the Toro Rosso battle? You talked about those two young drivers. Are you Team Pierre or Team Brendan? Trumpets.
Sorry, I'm laughing at the chat room at Lucas's comment, but I'll let Steve introduce that if he's found it.
You mean the one where Lucas says, will Stoffel and Fernando wear fireproof flip-flops during the race?
That one.
I reckon that'd be something to see, all right.
Go on then,
As
Steve.
for my predictions for the race, if it's raining on Sunday, then I think the Red Bulls have a real chance. Personally, because I'm an Australian, I'd like to see Ricciardo do well. But I think if it's raining, he's going to have a big fight because Verstappen's very good in the wet too. If it's a dry race, I think at this stage you still have to put your money on Hamilton and the Mercedes. I think they're going to be very hard to beat. And I think in the dry, Red Bull will be second, and I think Ferrari will be third. As for who's second and third, if it's wet, that's an interesting question. It could be Force India's day if it rains, and they might have a chance at the podium.
Now, it's interesting there. You're talking about the order we think people are going to finish in the wet, in the dry. No one is mentioning Valtteri Bottas. Valtteri Bottas has potentially the best race car on the grid with a teammate that goes all out, absolutely everything or nothing, and none of us have mentioned him at all in any of our predictions. Now, Chris, Bottas says he is capable of winning the World Championship, and he looks to Nico Rosberg as his example, somebody who took 3 seasons sizing up his opportunity and then finally pouncing in 2016. Is Bottas massively deluded? Is he just saying what he's expected to say? To me, this is his last season in Mercedes, whatever happens.
I think he can easily be world champion. Well, not easily. Let me take that part of the sentence back. But yeah, he can be world champion. He's got potentially the quickest car on the grid, and we know that on a good day, he can beat Lewis Hamilton. He just needs to be able to find those good days very consistently. And of course, with Lewis Hamilton as your teammate, it is a major uphill struggle to compete with him. And that's, the mountain that Valtteri has to climb. But I'd say, of course he's got it in him to try and do that.
Trumpets, what are we listening to here? Bottas is not Nico Rosberg.
No, he's not. But think about how long it took Rosberg to figure out, assuming you put him, on equal with Hamilton the year he won, and not,
a step behind with the dice falling his way.
But it took him several seasons to get to terms with Hamilton, and we all know that Bottas joined Mercedes at the very, very last minute. So I think this season will be the first proper test of Bottas. He needs to do better than he did last season, and significantly so.
So I think, I think it's just down to probabilities. The closer you are to your teammate, the more faces you get on the 20-sided dice of fate. And it rolls and it picks you out, not based on your individual performance on the day, but on how likely you are to win. If you can get your face on 5 of those sides, then you're more likely. I think Rosberg, on a 6-sided dice, he had 1, maybe 2 of those sides. And finally, after 4 rolls of the dice, he was good enough to take advantage of a bit of luck. He did have a bit of luck, but the point is, he was good enough over 4 seasons and close enough to eventually win after 4 seasons. And can't really blame him for recognizing that and then bowling out. How many faces, Matt, do you think Bottas has on that 20-sided dice against Lewis Hamilton? I would say 1 at best.
Well, I say 1. However, I was going to add that the more of the circuits they resurface, the better his chances will get, because the biggest differentiator between him and Hamilton, as far as I can tell, has been Hamilton's management of the tires. This is where Bottas has really struggled. The newer the asphalt, the less grippy it is, the longer the tires last, the closer he has been. And we all recall his amazing qualifying lap in the Williams, where he just about stuck it on pole were it not for the very last corner. And on circuits like that, he will be much closer to Lewis. And so the more they resurface, the better his chances get.
The thing that you mentioned, sort of about the probability aspect of it, I think it'd be interesting if we see them in more close, wheel-to-wheel situations, how Valtteri handles that, because we know that Lewis in those sort of situations, 9 times out of 10, he'll come out on top. He knows how to take a situation and turn it into his own. So it's how Valtteri then reacts to that and tries to get himself ahead in that one. That's going to be sort of a key play in this championship if he wants to challenge for it.
Okay, well, we're running out of time, but honestly, I think you're all being very generous, and Bottas seems like a lovely bloke. There's not a cat's chance in hell that he is going to pull a Rosberg on Lewis Hamilton. Lewis Hamilton's title contenders this year are the winner of the Red Bull battle. I think it'll be Max Verstappen. I think Red Bull have got previous on picking a favourite, and I feel that they've picked Max Verstappen or Sebastian Vettel. Bottas has 1 chance of staying in that Mercedes seat, and that is being a good rear gunner number 2. And the Battle of the Finns last year showed that, yes, the number 2 driver would have been a deciding factor had either of those number 2 drivers made themselves a nuisance. The fact is, Bottas not only didn't challenge for the title, he barely made himself a nuisance to Sebastian Vettel in his challenge of Lewis Hamilton. Bottas is going to be miles off. Don't even think about Valtteri Bottas as a championship contender. Matt, we've run quite long. It might be because it's a Saturday and we're relaxed and it's not a school night. We don't have to get up tomorrow morning. However, it is time to say goodbye. So where can people find you if they want more?
Well, they can find me at MattPT55 on the Twitters. You can look for, once our inestimable video editor gets through hacking together my miles of footage, a very interesting Trumpets Time coming up. My visit to the virtual reality racing club that is Hub Neo here in New York City. And of course, you can always go to Amazon and buy any of my wife's books at A Weaver Writes to distract your significant person whilst you watch the race and the qualifying. We certainly wouldn't want to argue with that.
Sparkles, where can people find you on the internet, my man?
You can get me on Twitter at cstevens_journo. You can get my feature in Autosport magazine this week. So it's come out, and then in the next edition, I'll also be talking about the cancelled meeting from Donington. So I don't actually know what we're putting in the mag just yet. We'll work that out tomorrow. And you can also check me out on E-Radio, and we'll be doing our Punta del Este E-Prix race review on Tuesday, Matt?
Tuesday it is.
A lot of people on the internet saying nice things about you at the moment. Chris Stevens, congratulations on your progression. I'm looking forward to reading your feature as well. Steve Amy, it's not unfair to say that you're not a young man and you didn't grow up in the internet age. Do you have an internet presence at all?
No. In fact, I had a client who once came to me and I quoted for a job. And when I went back to talk to him, he said, I went to look you up on the internet and I couldn't find a single thing. And I said, well, in that case, I've done my job, haven't I?
So you only really deal with us online. You're in our Patreon Slack group as well. You have a bit of fun there. You're currently editing together the masterclass that me, Brad, Philpott, and Chris Stevens did. Did we do anything like well enough to put together something entertaining?
We'll pull out something that will be fairly entertaining. It was a good exercise, and the second one will be much better.
Oh, wow. It's a good learning experience. Ouch.
That's exactly right.
The post-production will be good. We'll do a lot of voiceover. If it worked for Blade Runner, it can work for us as well. Make sure
we'll make it work.
Make sure you follow the show at Missed Apex F1. Now, you still have a couple of days to retweet the pinned tweet at Missed Apex F1, and we'll be announcing the winner online and then on the Australia Race Review. But you can win signed copies of Mark Gallagher's book, The Business of Winning. Is it The Business of Succeeding? The Business of Winning. That's embarrassing. How could I not remember that? It's The Business of Winning. You retweet that and follow Missed Apex F1, and we'll pick a winner at random. Now then, you can also follow me at Spanners Ready. Join us for the Australian Grand Prix race review. We'll be the first one, apart from Checkered Flag, and that's cheating because they're sponsored by a big corporation. If Autosport beats us, same thing for that. The first independent podcast review will be us at Missed Apex Podcast. So until then, remember that wounds heal, chicks dig scars, and glory lasts forever. This was Missed Apex. F1 starts now! Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, oh, silly Spanners, what a wally. He's forgotten. Or have I made it into a feature? Have I finally turned me forgetting comment of the week into a feature, not a bug? No, I haven't. I completely forgot it. But Steve looks ready, so let's go for
Comment of the week.
And yes, Matt, thank you for waving frantically to remind me that I'd forgotten something obvious. It's only been how many episodes? I think it's like 200.
Something like that.
Steve, have you got any contenders for comment of the week?
Oh, there are plenty of contenders today. Blackout 19 with his comment that Ferrari is sponsored by Philip Morris, but they can't put a name on the car, so huge clouds of smoke are the answer. I think that's a brilliant piece of advertising, because have worked in advertising. I think that's a great piece of thinking, Steve. Sam Watley has actually two contenders. One is a comment about the FIA have flip-flopped for years. Eventually, it had to make it onto a car.
Yeah.
And he also said that now Honda are gone, McClaptrap can probably implicate the Russians in their car failures.
It's always the sneaky Russians.
Well, it always is. But I think the winner probably should be Lucas with... The question is, will Stoffel and Fernando wear fireproof flip-flops during the race?
And who made that comment? Sorry, Steve?
Lucas.
Well, Lucas, you are the winner of...
Comment of the week.
Feel free to add that to your Twitter handle. See you later, guys. Good night. And we're out of there. We're out of there for the audio. No, guys, just say...
Good show.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Chris. Thank you so much for coming in very last minute. And Steve, how did you find your first appearance on Missed Apex podcast in the heat of anger? Because you judge us so terribly when we are, we are rightly terrible. But I mean...
Well, it's a different thing. That's why I'm on the side of the camera that I'm on,
Well,
and
it's
not standing in front of it.
It's the old quiz show thing, isn't it? You get all the answers, but when you're actually on there, it's a different story. If anyone remembers the quiz show 15 to 1, where 15 candidates have 3 lives and they get whittled down to an eventual winner, my dad used to sit there and he used to shout at the TV, "Oh, these contestants, they're all idiots." So finally he applied to it and he got on. He got on 15 to 1. Anyone under 30 will not know what I'm talking about, but he got on there. Anyway, he stood up first. He got a question. It was a cooking question. Didn't get it. Sat back down again. Second cooking question. Didn't get it. Out. That's him. Completely out of it. We're watching the replay back, and my girlfriend, who he hated for being stupid at the time, got both those questions. Sat at home, just went, "Yeah, that's casserole or whatever. Oh, yeah, that's tagliatelle." And he was fuming. Absolutely furious. I think that's what you've experienced today, Steve.
A bit of that. I was quite tense at the beginning, but it started to get together as I felt a little more relaxed towards the end of it. So the next one will be better. Like everything, a learning process.
Are you gonna save me when I completely mucked up my intro? Now, in the olden days, before you were here to save us, I would have just stopped, started again, and just done the whole intro again. But now I rely on your magic. Are you able to snip out, or I just completely fluffed my intro so that anyone that watches this back just thinks I'm an amazing presenter?
Yes, we could probably do that, so long as you send a big bag of money.
Oh no, that escalated fast. Good job on the show content, Matt. Matt, do you mind if I take out one segment out of the first 3?
No, whatever.
No, just out of the first 3. Did you notice today, for some reason, and we haven't had this for a long while, we sort of staggered a little bit in the first 20 minutes, and then the best part of the show, I feel, was actually the last 40 minutes. But we've then run over a lot.
Yeah.
It's because the news items are news items.
Yeah.
And there wasn't a lot of interplay between us. Whereas once we get to the race and the preview, there's more room for people to go back and forth about stuff.
Yeah, it was a bit.
I was not on my A game at the beginning because I was so tired.
It was a bit Trumpets time at the beginning, wasn't it?
But that said, everything that I said is interesting and applicable. So, in the interest of time, do what you got to do.
In your opinion, yeah. Okay, yeah, that's fine. Yeah, so Chris, what was wrong with you? Why? Honestly, you sounded like an emo for a lot of it, like, I think McLaren will do okay.
No, just because what do they say in conformists? That's what they say in South Park.
You
right?
then flick that hair off to the side.
Conformists. No, it's just I'm very tired. I've been blasted by the beast from the east, all day because I've been running around a paddock and trying to get news stories, and I've got we've got, quite a sizable hole to fill now because I was going to have a good bit in the mag. But of course, with a cancelled meeting.
Why didn't you ask someone in the WhatsApp group if they'd be willing to fill your hole? I need a Tumbleweed soundtrack, don't I? That's what I mean.
Or just the crickets.
Just the cricket sound. No, it was pretty good. Yeah, sorry, Matt. People think that that's fighting talk about Trumpets time.
No, it's a compliment. I mean, when I was interviewing the guy at the virtual
Oh,
reality.
yes. We should have just put that out tonight, shouldn't we?
Yeah, I don't believe it's quite ready, is it there, Steve? I literally
not quite.
uploaded all the footage yesterday. But I told him flat out, like, he was like, so should I do this? I'm like, look, we're going to have a conversation. And it's just going to be a conversation. I recorded maybe an hour and 10 minutes worth of footage. This is a third trip. And honestly, were it not for customers literally walking in the door saying, I have to give you money now to play these games, we could have gone another 2 hours of recording, just because I am someone who just gets real interested in all of the nitty gritty and the details and the facts and all the stuff like that. And it's just fascinating to talk about.
I've just realised I don't have to edit this till tomorrow night, so I can completely relax. But yeah, do you know what? I've never listened to a trumpet time.
That's okay.
I assume they're okay. So chat room, are the trumpet times okay? No, because, right, okay, so he tends to do them midweek, and I think what we will do is, on the weeks where we have, say, a Joe show, so we've got lots of content, or we have an interview, Matt could possibly start taking over a Sunday slot for the monthly trumpet time once we get the video and stuff sorted out. But normally he's been doing them during the week. I go, there's a trumpet time. All right, I'll make sure the audio's okay. So I listen to the intro, which is brilliant, by the way. I love the intros on trumpets time. It's like, bow, 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 jazz. And then there's Matt going, hey, American voiceover. And I go, yeah, that sounds slick. And then I listen to the first word of another person, and I go, okay, the audio's good. And then, he's just going to talk about tires or something, or 2021 regulations. Who cares? It's 4 years away.
It's nothing like what they're conformist.
Oh, my God. I'm going to listen to, tech news today instead. Because I hear a lot from trumpets, to be fair.
Yeah, no, because we do talk a lot on WhatsApp and Slack and all the other communication channels we have open. No, I think the Anil show we did about the alternate Formula One tracks was particularly brilliant. It's always fun to talk to Summers.
Yes. Yeah.
And this guy is the thing about the virtual reality thing that is very interesting is, and this is more my take on talking to them than it's necessarily. I think it just evolved. It was just a hobby. People got into it and started racing it, and he realized he could make a business out of it. And what they've come down to is pretty much they're targeting the racing community with their custom-built motion simulators and virtual reality. And what's interesting to me about it is pretty much all of the simulators that exist now are primarily aimed at setting the car up. So you look at what Red Bull uses, you look at what Mercedes use, and the drivers themselves say, the simulators don't really help us all that much. It's mostly about, they help us in terms of we have a really good setup nailed when we walk into Friday practice. What's interesting about what they've done here, and they've been very clever about how they've engineered it, is they've created a motion simulator that even though it only has 3 degrees of freedom, it properly makes you feel like you're in the car. It has pitch, and it has forward and back, it has side to side, and it has a yaw element, which they call a traction loss element. So that when you are driving a car, you can feel the rear of the car starting to go as you're driving. So this is the first thing that I've seen that, were you someone who said, I want to take my car to a track day at Watkins Glen. And this is the example used because they do have someone with a Porsche who tracks it at Watkins Glen. And he comes in and he practices so that he can optimize his track day. He set up the car just like his car, so it feels like his car when he drives it. And he can drive the track and figure out where he's going to gain time, where he's going to lose time. And they have, Alan Bush, ex-European karter, who was on a track to Formula One, he'll sit there and watch your laps and tell you what he thinks, kind of like Bradley has done for you.
Yeah, and in that time you've been talking, we've lost 10 people off the live stream, so if that's any indication of how generally... Actually, do you know what? It is really good. When you've got someone over your shoulder going, you've actually got more track to use on that entry on there, so move out left. You just brake a bit later, or, you don't need that gear, or drop another gear. I mean, it's incredible how much lap time that takes off. Whereas if you're there on your own, just trying to, trial and error, you're not good enough to pick it down to the one variable that was costing speed, because you're probably doing 3 things wrong as you go into the corner. So the next time you do 3 different things wrong, and you have no idea what it was that did it better or worse. Having someone over your shoulder is absolutely incredible. Steve, you must be a bit of a racer. You've in your many years.
Oh, not for a long time, but yes, I enjoyed a little bit of kart racing when I was a little bit younger. But these days I'm a bit, what's the word? Fat. That's the only word to describe it. I find it hard to fit into a cart, I think.
If you ever make it over here and we do karting, we will ballast everyone up to Steve Amy weight. So there you go.
Is there enough lead in Britain for that?
lead stocks soar as the Steve Amy ballast.
We'll buy futures before you make your trip, eh? And that's pay for everything.
I think that's probably illegal because we've got inside information. On that. I'm glad you had fun at The Sims, mate.
Yeah, well, and the thing is, it's not just, and I'm not making this point because I got so into the engineering. But at the end of the day, they're building a community, much like we've done with our podcast. And to me, they're building a community of racers. And what's interesting about it is, what does it cost to go do a karting session? Well, in New York, it's going to be expensive because first thing you have to do is leave the city to go karting. Here, you can go pay $25 on one of their track days because they offer regular track days. And you're there for 2 hours with whoever else shows up. And you get as many races as you have time for. Pick your car, pick your track. They use project cars too. So it's more than just they offer this service. They're building a community of people, of urban racers, because it's a much greater challenge to get to an actual track from New York City than it is a lot of places in the UK, certainly. So it's also that community building aspect that interested me very, very much. And I think you get a sense of that when we finally get the interview cut together.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. Well, if you're coming over for Formula E, then I'm definitely going to go take you there and embarrass you.
I will get a later flight on Monday just so we can do that.
Oh yeah. Well, actually, I'm kind of hoping. I got to talk to Spanners, but I'm kind of hoping their rig is transportable. It's not much bigger than Bradley's rig in his garage. So I'm kind of hoping that I've suggested to them that taking the rig to the event and making it part of the E-Village would be kind of a brilliant thing.
Well, the thing is, because Formula's got its own thing going on there, so they might say no.
See, but they're not. It's different because it's a custom motion simulator.
Yeah, I suppose. But that's the thing. They don't want them to show off look how much better our sim is than the ones we use.
On the other hand, that might be something they would consider investing in for the following season.
Yeah, true. Oh man, I'm looking forward to watching some MotoGP once we are done here.
Witchcraft.
No,
doesn't make any sense.
Formula E.
MotoGP.
Formula E. Wait till the live stream is done. Then you can talk about what you really want.
What I really, really want. What I really, really want is to see how MotoGP won.
Just no sense of self-preservation whatsoever.
Yeah, right. Because you've mentioned...
I do bike stuff on motorsport.com.
Except you don't ride a bike.
Yeah, but we're on the Missed Apex feed, so you should be...
Oh, I see.
Missed Apex products.
Yes. So long as I plug the show. I already plugged the show. Listen to E-Radio on Tuesday at whatever time we say it will be. Go to our E-Radio show on Twitter to find out more.
Man, the chat room is just going mental. They love you, Steve, by the way.
Yeah, everyone loves Steve.
Yeah.
You have.
I don't know why.
With your guitars and your T-shirt.
Yeah.
You've won the day here.
Well, it just shows you what an old fart I am. I mean, these guys were around when I was a young man.
Okay, let's talk about Steve's...
But we still love those guys now.
Let's talk about Steve's performance. Oh, by the way, I've changed the live stream, so I've just got my green screen now. But let's talk about Steve's performance. So, Steve, let's go to the chat room. All right then. All right. Oh, hang on a minute. There's a croc hanging off my leg. Get off me, croc. Okay. Oh, no, I'm nearly ready now.
Put in the WhatsApp where it's like, no, you're my lunch.
A croc's biting my leg.
That's Rod.
Cheeky little bugger. I'll bite its leg.
That's Roger. That's Roger, my pet croc.
My kids can't stop listening to my Steve Amy impression that I put on the WhatsApp. Croc thought it was going to be my lunch. Now it's my lunch. Ha! Anyway, so yeah, it was quite good though. It was it's like story time with Pops Amy. I liked it. It was like what what's going on the chat room? Gav around the tree.
all you young whippersnappers. Good
Do you know what
grief.
you sound like? Charlie Cox.
Who is Charlie Cox?
Charlie Cox. Okay, you don't watch. Okay, he's the commentator, the Australian commentator.
On what?
Well, he did MotoGP for BBC for a few years. I can't remember what else he did, but he was just brilliant.
I've watched lots of MotoGP races, and I know the guy. I know the guy you're talking about. Yes, I do know the guy you're talking about. Yeah. Oh, well, that's okay if I sound like him. He's pretty good.
Yeah, he's got a great voice. This Spanners has disappeared behind him.
I'm ruining the magic.
And the curtain.
I should put back my.
You've been doing that since you started the show.
Aw, I should put. Do you know what? I had this T-shirt that I wanted to wear for ages, and it's just like a green Manila T-shirt, and I liked it, but it's really unforgiving. So I lost a little bit of weight, and I was like, I can finally wear that T-shirt on the live stream, bright green. I just didn't think about it at all, bright green. So I set up the stream, and my body disappeared. If you go to @SpannersReady and look at my latest tweet, it was just me going, damn it. I
think it would be kind of fun. We could literally be a whole show of talking heads.
We could make it happen. Floating heads. We could all be like.
That'd be pretty weird. Yeah, for the last show of the season, we should do something weird like that.
Are you watching that?
Nobody can see that. Man.
After 3 years, how does no one know that sticking your phone up to a cheap webcam? Oh, there we go.
So I have to. We had a whole series of questions from the Slack group.
All right, come on then. Let's go for it. Let's go.
I'm going to bang through them, but I want to start with Marcus Maldonado. If Merck repeats his champs, they pull off a 1-2 in the Drivers' Championship. No, Vettel or Verstappen. Edited. Who will be the first team to suffer grid penalties for exceeding the permissible number of power units? Any Renault runner.
Yeah.
What is the unladen airspeed velocity of a Toro Rosso Honda? And I need to answer
wait. Yeah. Okay, go on then. You answer that. What, a European Toro Rosso or an African Toro Rosso?
Yes. It's going to be 1.3 Ericssons, unless Sauber are within 5 kilometers of the sea, in which case it will be 1.7 Ericssons. So there you go. I felt that was important to answer. And Laksh wanted to know about the technical difficulties of a high rake philosophy. Well, aside from simply paying for one's lifestyle, the biggest issue really is sealing the diffuser properly. And that's always going to be the issue with a high rake. And that's why Merck goes with the low rake and longer, because you get the same diffuser surface area, but you have less issue sealing the diffuser.
But what they did as well is that they wanted sort of consistency between the cars as well. So you see Ferrari have done something very, very different with their car this year, and actually it seems to have cost them. Whereas, Mercedes have, refined the theory, and they're doing very well.
Have you seen?
Well, your assumption is that it has cost them.
Have you seen Ricky Buxton's comment in the chat room? That's not an audio edit. This is an audio edit.
There you go. Christopher would like to know, will this be the first season since 2015 that Ericsson will score points? Or will he be yet again the only full-time driver with 0 points when the checkered flag falls in November?
I mean, okay, so we give Ericsson a lot of crap, but is he really that bad? Yes. No. So, yeah, he is, yeah. No, he is. You're wrong. What's wrong with you? Right, hang up. How do you right click? Remove person from
All right,
contact.
fine, do
Group
it.
or,
I'll go and watch the MotoGP.
group
please
or
do it.
contacts. Group. No, how can you? Bizarre. You're absolutely bizarre. He's Stroll level. No, he's not. He's clearly not Stroll level. But yeah, but he's obviously off the pace, isn't he? Come on, Chris. Oh, you're such a journo.
Yeah.
You're such a
Yeah, he's
journo.
off the pace. I feel like you give him a lot more flack than he deserves, though.
I would say of all the people on the grid, based on history, that he is the least likely to score points. That doesn't mean he won't. And especially with Leclerc being a flat-out noob, he's got a better chance than usual. But Leclerc also had such a scintillating end to the GP2 season. It's really hard to see him.
But here's the thing about F2, though. It's nothing like F1.
I tell Lewis that.
I mean, who's Lewis?
Lewis Hamilton is the 4-time
Back
world
then-
champion of
no,
Formula
back
1.
then, it was. But what? F2 keeps high-deck tyres and F1 didn't use them. They've got a completely different grid. The whole racing system is different. The whole factor of the series is just so different to F1.
Chris, do you need to go and watch racing, do you?
So no, seriously. Okay, look at all of the last few people who have won the GP2 championship. Okay, Hamilton, Rosberg, and Grosjean.
God, they were terrible. Horrible.
No. Let me finish my fucking point.
Oh my god, the internet will burn down!
In 13 years,
So easy.
12 or 13 years of however long that championship's running, they're the only ones who have had any kind of success. You look at like Palmer, Fabio Lima, for Christ's sake.
Yeah, but Palmer, there's a bit of an exception because they just said again and again and again and again.
Van Dorn, I'm sure, will do great things. He started to wait a year to come into F1. So did Gasly. So did Palmer. It means nothing anymore. It's just a completely superficial championship.
I can't believe that I asked who if you were on Team Brendan or Team Pierre, and you just absolutely smashed over that and asked Steve something from the chat room instead. I still want to know.
Okay, here's the thing the thing with Pierre. He may be the last GP2 champion, but I rate Antonio Giovinazzi, the man that he beat to the title, higher than him.
Don't be cryptic. Just say things. It's two Jack Daniels into the night.
Giovinazzi had. If we're talking about the difference between drivers and racers, Giovinazzi was more of a racer. Gasly's more of a driver. This is what.
The thing is, that was Antonio's first year in the car. Pierre had already spent 2 years in that car.
But there's the difference between drivers and racers has to do fundamentally with overtaking, and we saw this difference with Rosberg and Hamilton. Rosberg was probably on driving close to the equal of Hamilton, but when it came to overtaking, it was something he really had to work at. Whereas for Hamilton, it was almost entirely. I mean, I hesitate to call it intuitive because at that level, nothing is. He will have worked all of his stuff out over years, but Hamilton simply did not have to use the same level of processing before he did something that Rosberg did, and that
gave him space on a C drive system.
Hang on a minute. Yeah, I've got to stop though for a second because I've just realised we've never asked Steve who he supports in F1.
Oh crap!
This could be a deal. This could be the end of our video. This could be the end of the video. Go on. Who is it, Steve?
No, as a driver, it would have to be Daniel Ricciardo because he's Australian.
National
Ricciardo
bias
Frozy,
aside.
if such a thing exists. But in terms of teams, the first team I followed was Williams because Alan Jones was driving and was willing to win the world championship.
You're just a patriot, a blind patriot, Steve. What's wrong with you?
Pretty much.
All right. Yeah, of course I am, mate.
But for the 80s and 90s, it was Williams for me, and I always thought McLaren were the bad guys, and so I always, was a Williams supporter. And I guess since Australian drivers have been in Red Bull teams, I guess I've been a bit of a Red Bull supporter, although I think Red Bull are right bastards to Australians, to tell you the truth.
Oh, because of Multi-21. Oh, it's a good job you're not still bitter, Steve.
And all sorts of other things. I mean, Jesus, Mr. Marco doesn't like Australians very much, does he?
So apart from Australians, though, Steve, if you had to say one non-Australian driver on the grid for next season, who are you rooting for?
If
Wow.
your choices were Hamilton, or Hamilton, who would you pick? This is his question.
Look, it's a leading question. You're right.
Listen, to tell you the truth, none of them particularly excite me. I guess of the younger drivers, I really think that Ocon is the one that's got the most, kind of.
I
raw
wish
talent.
we talked
He
about that.
needs to develop a bit. So I think Ocon is someone who's going to be in 2 or 3 years is going to find himself in a position where he can begin to race for podiums and for wins and sort of thing. And he's going to be the one to beat later on. I mean, let's see what Leclerc is like. I can't say that I know a bucket load about him.
You're not allowed to say Leclerc without people getting very, very snobby, Steve.
Leclerc. Okay, sorry about
Leclerc.
However he pronounces it. No, don't get me wrong. Leclerc is a hugely talented driver, but I'll be properly impressed when he does it in F1.
He's got to beat Ericsson. If he doesn't beat Ericsson, done.
He will.
Done.
No, he will.
Look,
He will.
I will
Banners,
point out to you,
even I could beat Ericsson.
And you're massive.
One of the historical points that I did not make in the show because of time was the fact that one of the most interesting results in Australia last year was Giovinazzi finishing 12th in a Sauber.
Yeah.
And that was ahead
That's
of
right. That's forgotten.
And he nearly outqualified Ericsson as well, had he not made that boo-boo at the final corner.
Yep, and if he hadn't driven it into the bridge in China, he might have driven for something.
I feel like China undid a lot of the work that Australia did for him. Like, just because he, aquaplanes on the surface, people think he's
hang on, that wasn't his only crash, was it?
Yeah,
he then binned it.
No,
the next
he
time.
aquaplaned twice at the same place. Boo-hoo.
No, he then in another appearance he crashed as well.
Ooh, we've invited controversy. Ocon has shown nothing
the
to be on.
qualifying one was dry, yeah.
Then we'll
All right, we'll get to Giovinazzi. Let's do this. Let's do this here. Ocon Perez. Perez is going to take Ocon this season.
No.
He was mugged last season. He didn't know what was coming. Perez is a quality racer, and Ocon is going to get spanked down.
Yeah.
Sit down, rookie.
No, he is a quality racer, but Ocon is I feel like a more talented driver, and he's got everything ahead of him.
Okay.
Just in the same way that Perez was once the up and comer, Ocon is now the.
I'll take
the
money.
chaser.
I'll put a shiny old £10 note, like a paper one, because I've got it in my wallet and I can't be bothered to take it to the bank. So if you win, you will have to take it to the bank yourself. But
No, I won't. What I will do, I'll tell you what, I will sit on that for 50 years and suddenly it will be worth.
Okay, tell you what,
Like-
the actual £10 note that's in my wallet that I can't be bothered to take to the bank versus one of your new £5 notes, Perez
No!
will be Ocon. I'm giving you
Oh,
2
God,
to
that's
1.
a 2-to-1 bet. That's mental.
How are
There's
you
no
not
way
taking
you
that?
should take-
Oh, you are such a wimp. You are honestly the
Well, but
worst.
don't forget, this is a guy who thinks he can beat a roulette wheel.
Oh,
I
my God.
can't. I can't beat the roulette wheel.
This is a journalist who thinks that Massa was still a good driver when he was racing with Bottas.
Oh my God! Yeah, no, a 2-to-1 bet is fantastic.
I can't believe he's turned that down.
Go
I
look
cannot
at the
believe
odds
it.
on the odds makers for Ocon and Perez, and you tell me you're not going to see 2-to-1. No, it's going to be dead even.
I think it's going to be even money between those two. I am gonna. I know Ocon is good, and I understand all your arguments. I've just been dying for Perez to do something. Do you know, like poking with a stick? Come on, do something. You've
He
clearly
did something in 2012 and that was it.
I bet that. Oh, and this is completely unfounded.
2014 and 2015.
Yeah, no,
as
but
well.
I'll bet he went in there, he lost the political battle with Jenson Button. I'll bet he didn't make many friends at McLaren, and then that's kind of killed him. Go on,
No,
Steve. Go on, Steve.
well, I would say
Steve,
that
you don't have to put your hand up in this bit. You just shout over us.
His Force India career.
I'm scratching my nose, mate.
So, actually, in the beginning of the show, I'm going to edit it out because I didn't want Matt to go to you so early. I wanted you to settle into the show. But I was holding up the Steve banner because I was trying to get you to go from upside down back to what's it? And you went, and you put your hand up to acknowledge me. And then Matt went, so there, Steve, what's a chicken licking with the chat room there? Because that's how it yeah, so
That's fine.
So edit that out of the video as well, if you wouldn't mind. And I'll get rid of that of the audio because you were thrown in too quickly for it. But Giovinazzi. There's loads of fans for Giovinazzi. A lot of the lady fans like Giovinazzi. You know.
I wonder why.
It's as
He's
if
Italian.
It's like as if I was a Grand Prix driver.
French.
He's French. Okay.
How is he French? He can't be French if he's called Giovinazzi.
Oh, I thought you were talking about Esteban Ocon. Excuse me.
Oh no. Well, Ocon.
No,
Ocon.
I know.
You were
He's
right. I'm
French.
so sorry, Steve.
Don't apologise to me. Apologise to Giovinazzi.
Yeah, I'm sure he's really insulted that I called him French.
I'm very
Most Italians would be.
Yeah.
No, I wonder why.
Yeah, it's interesting with these young drivers, though, isn't it? You sort of almost wish that there was 2 leagues of Formula One, and the second league was a little bit more of a spec, so that you could see. Do you know what I mean? I love it not being a spec
I'll
series.
tell you what that is, mate. That's Formula 2.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. Just fucking. As I heard it, I was like, ah. I heard what I said, but do you know what I mean? It's like we're torn.
No.
We do want the driver side of it,
After cars.
huh?
You want cars closer to Formula One cars.
Yeah, no, I know, but what I want is I want a spec series, but I don't want a spec series. I love Formula One for what it is, but I wish it didn't take 10 years to tease out which drivers were better than.
So basically, what you
yeah.
want is IndyCar.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
What, the series where 3 people who'd never done it before were at the front for ages. So
Yep, pretty much, because the car doesn't make that much of a difference.
yeah, but what about the rest of the field then, who have been doing it for ages? How come they couldn't beat 3 guys who hadn't stepped in before?
Because they're crap.
well, yeah.
They're not as good, obviously.
But then again, if you get a spec series where all the drivers are at the very top of their game, careful what you wish for. That's not actually that interesting to watch. Like, have you ever watched like real top level karting?
Well, I've got to say, you guys should watch the supercars a bit more.
Yep.
There's a
Stop
series that
being
is-
so Aussie centric.
No, but it's
But
true.
it's good
really right.
racing. It's good racing.
Okay,
because the cars
Steve, tell
are
us
close to
ne-
spec, but not quite.
So tell us when we should watch that, and we'll do it. We will definitely do it. We'll all sit here on Skype at 3 a.m. and watch it with you.
Yeah, and don't forget about IMSA. They're at Sebring right now, which is
Yeah.
Kellen.
Yeah, I do want to watch more motorsport, but it's the time and it's the effort. And part of the reason why F1 is so good to watch for me is because I am personally invested in the fates of all 20 drivers. So I know Matt's laughing at the chat room, but I am invested in the fates. So even if the 18th place car does something, I'm part of that story. Now, do I have the time to invest in emotionally in another series in all those drivers and all those stories? Last season,
Part of that story.
He identifies with a driver.
yeah, I identify with the drivers and the
So you identify, like you can identify with a team, you can identify with a driver.
So-
but
so,
most people
yeah.
watch sports do that for that reason.
So I might identify, if I watch the Super Cup, I might go, oh yeah, that's some good racing, I enjoy that. But when some guy spins out of 17th, I won't go, oh no, that's going to affect his career in this way, and that changes the politics, and that shifts the landscape here. Whereas with F1, even all the way down the grid, I do that because I've invested emotionally. And I really tried to do that with Formula E last season, and even then I couldn't put it into that. So,
Well,
You're
invest
lost.
yourself in following Simona Di Silvestro in the supercars. That way you can ease yourself into it.
Cool. Sorry, I was interrupting you a bit, Matt. What were you what were you laughing at? Put an explicit tag on this,
just
Steve.
part of me suggesting that what you really need to watch is Formula E. And of course,
Yeah.
it was funny because I know how you felt about it, but he's also kind of right. You're literally describing Formula E.
I know. And to be fair, Formula E is in season 4. I watched every single race, season 1, 2, 3, and I enjoyed it, and I got into the stories, but there was something missing for me. And when season 4 came around, I found I couldn't get myself out of bed for it, and I couldn't just go. I couldn't make myself care about what was going to happen this season, and it just like. I think I was like saying, okay, it's going to make this step, it's going to make this step, it's going to make this step, and it hasn't quite. So I've just taken a little bit of a break from it. I really am not doing it down at all.
You suck.
I know what they're doing. I know what's good about it. But personally, especially when I'm busy, am I going to spend my Saturday afternoon watching it?
I mean, no. Do you know what? That is a fair point because it's how I feel about IndyCar. Like, I know that there is a great racing series with a lot of top quality drivers, fantastic looking sounding cars that drive around some really awesome street tracks. In a way, it's what Formula E should become. But I simply do not have the time to invest myself in it. You know, if I'm already doing 750 Motor Club, keeping up with F1, doing my FE duties, now I've got to do MotoGP for motorsport.com, and then Superbikes as well. And then while you're there, you may as well be watching the British Superbikes and the touring cars and the 8 different support series that they have, you know. And then I've got to keep an eye on the WEC as well, just because it's WEC, you know. And then
I wish I could fill my week with motorsport. I wish I could, but given the time I have, yeah, I think that is part of it. And F1 is the sort of big fish, and it's the one where you can get the most information about the drivers and the teams. You know, like FE, it has a few outlets, sure, but it certainly doesn't have the same promotional push as Formula One yet.
That's why you should just come talk to me about it.
Yes, but that means talking to you. I talk to you quite enough. We have many long conversations, and you are young and you're 20, and you probably will just talk to me about iPod the entire time. They're the hip young thing,
when
aren't
am I
they?
ever talking to you about anything?
I don't know. I don't know what you young folk are
racing.
into. Sorry, into LOL surprise dolls. I don't know.
Oh, what are you on about? Do you know what's bad? You should take a good long look at me, because in about 15 years' time, your kids are going to be just like me.
Oh dear.
I don't know what to do with that information.
I've got 4 of them, so I know what it's like.
My son said to me this morning, and kids are so honest, aren't they? I said, look, I was shirtless in the bathroom. I said, look, son, I'm not fat anymore. And my son, he looked me in the eye, and sincerely, he didn't mean this in any nasty way at all. He just went, well, it is getting better. I was really proud of myself. He's like, no, it is getting better. Git. Little skinny git. I hate him so much. So, guys, thank you very much for hanging around on a Saturday night. It's been, obviously, we've hung around a bit longer than normal because we have no pressure of edits. We have no school nights tomorrow. Steve, thank you very much for coming on. Shall we put this video out normal time? Just as if, like, some Monday morning? I don't know if you can time delay it or whatever. Or do we put it up unlisted and then we'll make it listed at the normal when I finish the edit? And
I think it probably will, even if it goes up unlisted, I think it'll still trigger a...
Oh, will it?
I think so.
Is that right? Shall we?
Well, I don't know. I'll have to have a look at that.
Now then, here's the question. Do we run... I was going to say, run this video as a live stream tomorrow, but given that we had up to 90 viewers tonight, I'm not going to do that. Because I thought we would have about...
have that many?
Yeah. I thought we'd have like 10 viewers. Yeah, I thought we'd have like 10 viewers tonight and that everyone will want to catch it up tomorrow. But
everyone gets up and they're like, map's on, clear the schedule.
Yeah, well, do you know what it is though? But that's kind of like what I was like, because it's like, well, we couldn't do it on Sunday. We've got to do it on Saturday. Yeah. You know, you think, oh no, I'm too busy on a Saturday night because I'm really cool. Nope.
When you were messaging me earlier, I was when you first messaged me about coming on tonight, there was still a chance we were actually going to run today.
Yeah.
And I was sitting there going, yeah, we'll easily race in these conditions. This is not F1, you know. And there were people sitting there going like, yeah, I'd race on that. And then, but then we actually spoke to the drivers themselves, and we went, no, you can't.
We have to say, my son raced in the snow today. In the falling blizzard snow.
Slightly different going in.
He stopped halfway, and he stopped halfway because we bought him these new race gloves, which will be great in the spring. But he just went, Dad, and it's all on the GoPro beautifully. He's like, Dad, I can't feel my hands. And I went, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry, sir. So I whipped the gloves off and I warmed them off, and the Trax gloves were woolly. So it was like, yeah, that was more. So I was like, yeah, get me some woolly gloves. I'm rubbing his hands like that, and then we pour his woolly gloves. Off you go, kid. Off you go. And he was like, and afterwards he went, oh, it was so much better once I got the woolly gloves, Dad. But it was so bitingly cold. I think it was. It was -1, but it felt like -9, and it really did feel like minus. It was like a dry.
Was how cold?
Well, it was -1, but it felt like -9. So it was like a real biting, dry cold.
It was horrible.
And for
I
our
was
Scandinavian
outdoors
friends laughing at us, but I've got thick snow outside the shed out there. So, but yeah, and I'm sick of it. I'm sick of the snow. I've had enough.
It's March. Why is it snowing?
I don't know.
I went to rehearsal Wednesday, and it snowed on me every time I was above ground.
Is that normal in New
Sounds
York?
like you're
though?
a gopher.
Had more snow in March than we've had the entire rest of the winter.
Artemy X, I think, is from Finland, so he's saying -9 is cold. Yes, obviously in like Antarctica and the North Pole, obviously it's colder. Yeah, it's
Top of the top of Everest. I'm sure that's pretty nippy.
-20 there. Yeah, it's been minus
Yeah.
20 here in New
But
York.
the average temperature here is not -9.
No, we're not used to it. I was born on the equator. Damn it! Like, I cannot. I'm not built for these conditions, and not in this sustained fashion. In the UK, we've been accustomed to like a week of snow once a year, and that's
And
that.
not in March.
Not
Not
to
in goddamn March.
Not like a month of just misery. Can we just please have grey rain all day long for a month like normal? Oh man, Australia must be brilliant. It's like paradise, isn't it? Just like, oh look,
My
the
mate
sun.
Luke's in Australia at the moment, and he's loving it.
Oh, it's a great place. The weather is fantastic at the moment.
Is he
Sort of
been
about
attacked by
28 to 30.
that animal yet?
The Northerners in Newcastle and that, when the sun comes out in spring, they howl at it. They're like, probably, what's that like? Oh my God, it's coming right at us.
And then people in Essex are like, you know, the moon and the sun, they're like two different planets.
Listen, right? No. Honestly, like the Earth is flat, so I don't even know what people are getting at. So there's no rotation, is it? So, yeah.
Wait, what was that?
That's basically South Essex.
That's not South Essex.
I still got my flip phone
that
because
was-
I got my flip phone. I ain't no hipster, so I just flip it.
You are a
Sony
South
Ericsson.
London chap. Shut up.
Just
That's
Sony
not-
Ericsson. Mm. oh! About 10 minutes ago, I said we were going to go off the live stream. Bye, live stream. I forgot all this is going to be there for posterity for people for the patrons to watch. Go to patreon.com/MrApex. Give us money. I love you. Goodbye.